Redditors who work at cemeteries and graveyards, what strange and scary stuff have you witnessed? I worked for a county cemetery department years ago. We would go to all the cemeteries in the county and mow or just do basic upkeep. Occasionally people, mainly farmers, would stumble upon some headstones in a field or a stand of trees, and we would come out and prod the ground with dowel rods to find more headstones and re-establish the cemetery. Soon after I started working there, we got a tip about some headstones a farmer found while clearing out a path through some trees for easier access to his field. It turned out to be the oldest cemetery in the county, dating back to the 1700s. After investigating some of the names on the headstones, it got really creepy. The story is that before the cemetery was there, a schoolhouse stood there. The teachers were a husband and wife. It's not clear on what exactly happened, but the students and the husband and wife all died in the schoolhouse. The information we found kind of made it sound like an illness of some kind, and they were all quarantined in the school until they all died. After that, the school was demolished and the students and husband and wife were all buried right where the school stood. So yeah, I'm sure it's haunted. What's the dumbest thing someone has ever told you? It's dangerous to listen to your own heartbeat with a stethoscope. They said your heart will try to match what you heard, and that will in effect stop your heart. There was no explanation given when asked why medical personnel didn't have issues listening to patients with heartbeat irregularities. I've had life insurance for 2 years. I'm gonna cash it out next year and get $100K. A woman I worked with when I was about 20 believed in spontaneous generation of life, generatio spontanea. For example, rats would come into existence within a pile of food and paper waste without the necessity of a mommy and daddy rat. Had a teacher tell our class that it can't rain over water. She proceeded to tell us that if the clouds are over water, they will just wait until they were over land so it doesn't waste water. My boyfriend left his apartment for a week, came back, and saw shit and a used washcloth in his private bathroom toilet. His roommate was the only one there. When confronted, he swore on everything that a demon had done it, and tried to put the blame on him. What's the cringiest thing you've seen a bride and groom do for their wedding? I'm in the wedding industry. I've been to over 3,000 weddings. The singing your vows thing is never ever going to work out like you think it will. Never sing your vows. Never attempt to sing any part of your wedding. It will not go as you visualized it. A wedding day is not a good time for surprises. Don't surprise your bride with an unexpected part of the ceremony. Don't surprise your mom by the wedding itself. True story. The bride told her mom she was going to an engagement dinner. The only exception to this rule is if you give the bride a surprise addition to her ring, grandma's diamond, a ring made from her parents' rings, etc. If you are going to be late, communicate that to everyone somehow. Have your significant other, or your parents, or someone tell everyone you will be late. The staff needs to know, especially if you forget the rings. Don't stress it, it's a funny story. If you forget your vows, wing it as best you can. Just don't sing. Ask the officiant for help for last-minute vows. Finally, don't get drunk and be an ass. You don't want to be that guy. Have you ever been scared to the core of your soul? What's the story? Years ago, when I still lived at my parents' house, I was sleeping on the couch in the unfinished basement with my girlfriend at the time. I woke up to her shaking me awake with absolute panic and her voice whispering that there was a very tall man across the basement watching us. Hearing that made my blood run cold, so I slowly peeked over the back of the couch, and sure enough, I could just barely make out the shape of an extremely tall man facing us in the darkness. He was so tall that his head was close to the ceiling. I whispered to my girlfriend at the time that I was going to jump up and turn the light on, which had a string that you needed to pull to turn it on. And right when I did that, she needed to use the light to run to the stairs and get out of the basement. So after a second of psyching myself up for whatever came next, I counted to 3 and jumped off the couch and turned the light on. I finally got a proper look at the guy. It was my dad's effing scuba suit that he hung from the rafters to let it dry. My hands were shaking for a half hour after that, but we both got a good laugh out of it, eventually. What's the creepiest thing your child ever said to you? Not my kid, but a patient I had many years ago. Right after high school, I got a job as an orderly in a rehabilitation hospital. I was 18, and green as grass. Most of the patients were paralyzed, some paraplegics, some quadriplegics, some hemiplegics, strokes, and some brain damaged. One of the most seriously injured cases was a teenager, I'll call him Joe, who had been in a motorcycle wreck and had not been wearing a helmet. He hit a curb and suffered a severe head injury. His family, especially his mother, was convinced Joe could communicate, but none of the staff believed it. He was racked with spasms and never looked at people, but he always looked around the room randomly. When he vocalized, it just sounded like bizarre moaning without any form or rhythm. It was the privately expressed view of all the staff members that he wasn't in there, i.e. that he was too severely brain damaged to know what was going on around him. I thought other staff members were way too casual in the way they talked about Joe, rather than to Joe, when they were providing his care. Although he breathed on his own, he was on Unit 1, the unit with all the severely injured quads who were on respirators. His mother insisted on holding a bedside birthday party for him, on the unit, complete with cake, party hats, etc. We all thought it was a cruel charade, but we were ordered to attend and did so. We sang happy birthday, his mother fed him cake, he didn't seem to chew it. but he did seem to still have a swallow reflex. It was sad and it made me a little angry that the family couldn't accept what was the obvious truth, that he was alive, but not cognizant. I worked 3 to 11 shift, and as an orderly, my main duty was turning patients. Another strong young orderly and I went from unit to unit, turning patients from one side to the other, to avoid bed sores. When we were leaving Unit 1, I thought I heard whispering coming from the direction of Joe's bed. I walked closer in the dimly lit room and I could hear the very low strains of the Happy Birthday song. Joe was whistling, sort of tunefully hissing, very softly. From that moment on, I addressed Joe as Mr. Smith, and was very careful to speak directly to him, with respect. He still didn't seem to be in there but I wasn't taking any chances. I think the macabre thought that he might be conscious and aware of frightened people, and that's why they treated him as an object rather than as a person. This is my last weekend with my family and they don't even know it. Don't get me, 18M, wrong. I love them but they expect me to spend the rest of my life here in the projects joining my dad at his work. They never wanted me to leave the house let alone the state. I remember a few months ago when we were talking about college they looked at me like I'm crazy. My dad got so pissed off he was yelling at me and my mom was basically guilt-tripping me ever since about abandoning my family when they raised me, so the least I could do was stay to help my dad in his business. That's not the life I want though. For years they always kind of decided that I'm not doing anything else except this. So they don't even know that I started applying at different colleges, or that I've got a full scholarship. Couldn't even share the news with them because they'd lose their shit. My girlfriend and I already found an apartment to move in together closer to campus, which is like 20 hours away from here. Our summer classes start in over a week so we decided this is gonna be our last weekend here so we can have time to move. I'm not taking a lot with me except my clothes and important papers. She told me I should tell them since we're already leaving anyways but I don't got the heart to do it. To be honest I don't want today and tomorrow to be fighting or them being sad mad with me. I want our last weekend to be normal before I gotta leave. What accident happened in a sleepover that ruined the sleepover? Haha, in elementary school got invited to my crush's house, and while it wasn't a sleepover we were hanging all day. She gave me a lifesaver hard round candy, but I thought it was the gummy ones, the branded different kinds. Didn't like the flavor so I tried to swallow it whole. Started choking on it and her older sister had to do the Heimlich maneuver on me, to which I spewed the candy and a gloop of esophageal mucus the size of a slice of bread all over her kitchen floor. I think I died of embarrassment and never spoke to her again. I literally don't know what happened after that cause I was so flustered. My friend's pet turtles froze to death. I had got them about 2 weeks before we had a sleepover and got mad because I told them that I hoped they had the right supplies for them. They thought you could just put them in a tub of water with no heat lamp, sand or foliage. It was the middle of winter and they didn't have good heating. They died and had been dead for a few hours while we were having drinks and playing cards, and they didn't even bury them. They threw them in the trash. I did not stay the night for many years to come. What is the biggest OF I'm dead thing you've done at work, but nobody ever found out? I used to work for a big box pet store taking care of the animals that lived in the store. There was a rotation of the animals getting their accessories changed out and cleaned, i.e. water bottles, food bowls, plastic huts, every day. So each day the morning person cleaned that day's habitats and the closer did the dishes in the sink and set them to dry and be put back in rotation for use. It was sometimes difficult to complete any of these tasks while also dealing with customers. The sink we did dishes in was very deep and company policy stated that the dishes had to soak in a cleaning solution for a certain amount of time, so it took a long time to fill up the sink with the solution to soak everything. It was common to turn the water on to fill up the sink and go see if anyone needed help in the store while you waited. Not long after I started working there I was performing this task and got pulled into a long conversation with a customer. Normally I'd duck in the back and turn off the faucet if I thought the conversation would take a while, but this night I just completely forgot the sink was on. Cue like 20 minutes later walking in the back to ankle-deep water. The sink had overflowed and was filling the back space. The door had a rubber stopper at the bottom keeping it from going into the store. I took a squeegee and started herding the water into a drain on the floor on the back side of the fish wall, but it took a long time. I was so frantic and still had to pay attention to customers out on the floor. Luckily no one else ever went into the back unless you worked in the department and I was working alone. So I managed to herd most of the water into the fish drain and the rest dried overnight before the opener came in. No one ever knew I flooded the back space. Few months later I realized flooding was a common occurrence and my manager flooded it at least once a year.